Inner Strength podcast with myself, Cheryl. Welcome to episode 10. We are on, it's like a decade. Look at that. But welcome back if you listened to my other episodes. If not, just stay along if you want to go back and listen to them. That'd be awesome. If not, that's absolutely fine. So in episode 9, I gave you a little bit of a background on what I would be tackling in the next couple or so episodes of this podcast, this series. And it had to do with tapping into my understanding, my point of view on yoga and the practice of yoga. And I wanted to talk about this because I find there's so much disconnect or not understanding of yoga itself from people that don't have not dived into it, have not educated themselves on it, and you're just wanting to go to a class and figure it out. And I just remember when I was younger, and I went to my first class, didn't even know what it was. Actually, it wasn't even my first class. My first class was a prenatal yoga video when I was pregnant with my first child. And as great as it's supposed to be when you're pregnant, I actually fell asleep because I was so bored, which should have been a sign that I needed to learn to slow down and calm myself. But yeah, I was bored and I could not get through that yoga. It was actually a VHS that you put into a VCR. Now that gives you an idea of how old I am. But my first physical class that I went to was in Gagetown, which is in New Brunswick, at Base Gagetown, which is in the town over Mukto. And I don't know how I ended up picking this class. I think it was because I already went to the base gym, was working out, and I saw this class was offered. And I was like, I knew from my running and stuff that I should probably do some stretching, or let's figure out what this yoga is. And I just remember that I got hooked after that first class. It was just absolutely beautiful. I didn't feel bored, but we were not moving fast. I guess the only part of the class for that style, which I'll get into, was the sun salutations, and everything else was very thought of, held, controlled. There was breath work, which I had never done before then. And it was just like this amazing feeling for my body. And as I said in the past, when it came to me and stretching around all my other physical activities, I just thought stretching was not for me. And because I was stretchy, like I was flexible, and I wasn't a crazy gymnast or anything. I couldn't do like the splits or anything, but I was bendy. Like I could do quite a bit. And when I started doing these classes, I realized that like I couldn't even go into a forward fold. So standing or seated, like I had no mobility to my lower back. Like it just stopped. It was tight as a rock, hamstrings tight. But there was other things I could do. Like I could go into poses. We call it the bridge. But then I would go into the wheel, and the wheel's when you are on your back, you bend your knees, feet are flat on the floor, hands come on either side of the head, where like you flip them around so the palms are connecting to the ground, and you push through the hands and the feet and you come into this wheel. I had no problem doing those things. But then again, forward fold, full, not going to happen. And a shoulder stand, could totally do a shoulder stand. Plow, not even a problem, because I was doing those things even when I was in yoga. So it was just an amazing introduction. She was an amazing teacher. She went by the name Gayatri. And she was such a kind of cool, different personality, but just kind, very connected to her teachings. And yeah, but then she also taught spin class, which was so fun. She made spin class amazing, but that's going down a whole other tunnel, so we're not going to go that way. So like I said, that was my introduction, not knowing what it was. I just knew it was slow. There was some salutations, so I learned that word, Surya Namaskar in Sanskrit, and I thought it was amazing. I felt amazing. I could feel it, even though it was a slow practice. Man, there were days where I was like, I am feeling things in my body I wasn't expecting to feel from yoga. And so through the years, up until I got to Yellowknife, that's when I started learning, oh, there's different styles. So, because when I started looking for yoga studios when we got posted back to Edmonton, I was discovering all these different styles because I didn't realize there was different styles. I just went to a class. Well, first I did a VHS, boring. Then I went to this class in New Brunswick and it was amazing. And so when I went to another studio, I had talked about a little bit in the last episode of the podcast, it was a vinyasa flow, but I didn't know what that was. And I just went in there and I just started doing it and learning more poses and things and different ways of moving my body. Then I learned from there was Hatha. There was, now I did know what the classes I was taking in New Brunswick, I knew was Shivananda. So Shivananda yoga. And that is a classical style of yoga created from Swami Shivananda, who, from my understanding and education, he was originally a doctor. He went on travels, discovered yoga, and realized that he could kind of connect his medical background with yoga and just created this practice called Shivananda. And he selected 10 basic poses. I'm having a brain fart. I should know this. I teach it. And you have breath work and you have sun salutations. And that's what I was doing in New Brunswick. Then I was learning, oh, we don't always just hold a pose and then relax. Hold a pose, then relax. Because in vinyasa, you're flowing all over the place. And so when I started doing my teacher trainings, I was already inquisitive on what's going on? Why are we doing this? And I was really particular, and I think the majority of us are, on who is going to be our teacher, our educator, instructor, because there's some that just don't connect with us individually. And where I could like an instructor and my friend could dislike the instructor. It's just a completely different style. But I knew every time I went to a class, I just did what I was told. And just because that's what I did. And the majority of us going to these classes just go and do. So when I started doing my teacher training back in 2015, and it just worked out that it was linked to Shivananda yoga. I was so blessed to be able to actually meet Sylvie. She was my teacher for my teacher training. And again, a gift to have as my first yoga instructor teaching me to be a teacher. And it just learning how to teach people to come into these poses and the modifications and the variations. And the one thing I noticed with Sylvie, if I remember correctly, if she's listening to this, I'm sure she'll send me a message and tell me I'm right or wrong. There was never hands-on. She never came around and pushed on us or manipulated our bodies, the students, to go into the pose the way it looks on a page. And I found that very intriguing because up to that point, there were classes I was going to, and I had said in the last episode, I actually got injured in a yoga class because I just assumed when you see RYT 200 hours on a teacher that, oh, they're like a doctor. And that's my ignorance, right? And the majority of us have that ignorance. And so I found that intriguing that I wasn't told or shown how to align, how people align their bodies. And, but I also didn't question it at that point. Then when I started teaching and I started taking some more trainings, I did yin, and this is while we're still in Yellowknife, and I did some Iyengar based teachings through Ulu Yoga. And then I started working with Tim and V with Spartan Mind Strength Yoga. And they're the ones that really made me way more inquisitive on as an instructor and as a pupil on what I was doing with my body and what I was asking students to do with their body. I already had that feeling beforehand that after I got injured in a class and I became a teacher, I knew not to touch people, to manipulate or try to align their body with how I thought it should work or looked. I was very much under, in my point of view, to allow people to move into these things safely and learning how their body moves and how their skeleton is built. Think about it. All of our skeletons are built not the same. We have like usually the same amount of bones, being female or male, tissues, connections, tendons, muscles, but it's not every person is the same. I could be standing beside somebody that looks just like me, same build and everything, but our body still moves, flexes, flexion is different, the range of motion is different. So this has been in my head for quite a long time. So to go back quickly, Cole's notes on yoga itself, the modern yoga teacher, the one known, and you'll hear his name going classes, is Krishnamacharya. And he's the one that really helped yoga come to the West and spread the word. And he had some disciples or students that worked underneath him. So as I said, I learned with my first teachings, teacher training with Shivananda. And then from there, I learned vinyasa, hatha, yin. I have nidra, restorative, somatic, sup yoga. I have quite a diverse backing of yoga instruction. So what I want to tell you about Krishnamacharya, when he was working with his students, when they were learning through him, these were all mostly kids, 14, 15-year-old boys, maybe a little bit older, that could bend and manipulate their bodies in ways that the 46-year-old me just isn't able to do. And there's some 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that can't do what these students were able to do. And also to keep in mind, up until that point, anyone that practiced yoga or had a yoga teacher was usually someone with influence and money. So like people look at a yoga teachers now and just think, oh, karma yoga, you just shouldn't get paid for it. You're giving back to community. Don't get me wrong. I do my karma practice. I give back and I help people just because it's something I'm very committed to without earning coin. But it's also my career. And I've spent quite a bit of money with my trainings. But back then, the only people that really got these trainings were more people within like royalty, and usually men, not women. So one of the first women to be accepted to practice yoga was Indra Divi, and she worked underneath Krishnamacharya also. And she actually wasn't even Indian, she was Russian. So that's a whole other thing too. So one of the other, like a couple of names you might know is Patabi Joyce, who is the creator of Ashtanga Yoga. And then there's Iyengar Yoga, which is BKS Iyengar. And those two gentlemen were students of Krishnamacharya. So when you think of Ashtanga Yoga and Iyengar Yoga, these two guys, men, were students of the same teacher. The product of their teachings, so Ashtanga and Iyengar, they created afterwards and put their own spin on it. And it was also like when you look at Patabi Joyce, if you actually look in history, not too far back, it's not pretty. And when people are like, oh, this is thousands of years old, it's not. Those sequences are within the 19th century or 20th century. So that's like a whole other realm on going into these styles of yoga and how they were created and what is the actual legitimacy of the practice. So for today, I'm going to talk about Hatha and Yin mostly. So Hatha we hear about all the time. Technically, Hatha just two ways that I understand how to translate Hatha. It's Ha and Tha, sun and moon. Sun and moon. And I loved that translation because usually when I'm instructing or educating different movements, I always try to have a counter pose. I try to do the opposite of what we just did. So we're not working the body in the same way. If we're working on breath work, we're not just working on the parasympathetic nervous system all the time. Sometimes we want to tap into a gentle sympathetic nervous system, which is, people will say fight or flight, but it's also the heating breath. So it has positives to it. When you Hatha itself, like I said, sun and moon, opposites. Okay. So if I was going to go into, say, child's pose. So child's pose is when you lean back onto your heels, your butt comes to your heels, and your knees can be together or further apart, and you got this rounding to the spine. So, and then what I would do after that is let's counter that pose. Let's go into a cobra or a bridge or a sphinx or supported reclined butterfly, because now you're getting an arch to the spine. So that's how one of the definitions or way I like to translate Hatha. Another one would be force or forceful. So you're putting force onto the body. So adding that, so think of it, exercise, strengthening. Because when people sometimes think also of yoga, we think of just being passive and loose. And it's not always that. Yoga itself is movement and exercise. And the practice internationally with the word yoga tends to lean more towards something fluid or held and soft. And really, yoga is exercise. The practice of the asanas, and I say some people say asanas, I say asanas because that's my accent, I guess. So usually when people hear Hatha now, when you see a Hatha yoga in a class, a lot of people think, oh, this is gentle yoga. This is not going to be hard. This is going to be very passive. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's very much passive. But at other times, not so much. All yoga technically is Hatha. When you really look down to it, the practice of yoga, except for, I would say, restorative yoga and yoga nidra. Those would be the two that I would say there's no forcefulness, maybe except mentally. Mentally, there is force because you're creating this stillness. And for a lot of us, it's very hard to be in stillness and silence. Now, yin, which has become more famous within the last 20 or more years, or so years. And this type of practice is the way it's practiced now is usually they describe it as we describe it as tapping into the fascia, which is our deep connective tissue. It also taps into the lymphatic system, because with those holes where we're holding, we're getting the blood flowing within the lymphatic system. I personally think classical hatha, so say the Shivananda I have training in, is yin. But now, hey, let's market this. What are we going to do? And then the more science that came out showing how yin was beneficial, the bigger it got over the last couple of decades or more. What I personally don't agree with yin classes is going into these poses with a cold body. You're not warming up, and sometimes a lot of times you'll go to a yin class and there's no warm up. So you're going into these poses with cold muscles, connective tissue, and you're holding these poses for a lot of times, depending on the class, more than 5 minutes. When I teach yin, I may go from 90 seconds to 3 minutes. And that's with me trying to keep my students warm between each one, or having a warm up at the beginning. So, because you can get injured and put strain on the fascia and the muscles if they're cold and you're holding these poses for quite a long time. Because with yin, you are putting strain, you are stretching, getting into that deep connective tissue, and you kind of want to be uncomfortable when you're going into them. If you are comfortable going into these poses and you're not feeling anything, that's more restorative. You're not getting the benefit of getting into the fascia. And Shivananda was like that. You're feeling the strain, you're feeling the stretch. There's no pain. Always remember, no pain with any type of practice. If there's pain, that is your friend and is trying to give you information that you need to get something looked at, or like focus in on something, and maybe stay clear of something that doesn't feel right with, like, you're getting pain with, until you figure it out, or you may never be able to do that pose. So also with props, I fully support props. They are our friend. They help us dive into that discomfort of the yin pose. I said discomfort, not pain. When I mean discomfort is you're feeling that deep stretch where you still have control of your breath. If you don't have control of the breath, you are going too far into the movement. So remember that. You want to have control of the breath, okay? Then, and that's what I liked between classical hatha and yin. And I say that because classical hatha, I would say historically, how far back, the majority was, let's do sun salutations, let's do a movement, hold it, or a pose, and we're holding it, rest, pose, rest. Then, and that's kind of what yin is. You hold a pose, you come out of it, you move around a bit, then you go into another pose. You hold it, come out of it, move a bit. But I do highly suggest that your body be warm with it. Because, yeah, like on a cold body, it's hard on the body. And that's what I want you to take from this. Those two practices, classical hatha or hatha yin. So, and like I said, when you see hatha yoga, it won't always be gentle. It won't always be stagnant, meaning there could be flow. There could be sun salutations. And it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. If you can slow yourself down and take time to feel a pose, I find there's more benefit to that to going into a power flow class. Just my own personal preference. I've done power flow. I've done hot yoga, and they all feel amazing. There's a time and place for these things, also depending on your body, on your health. So take that into account. The Krishnamacharya, his students. So Krishnamacharya, historically the modern yoga teacher. If you look him up, he was born around 1888. He died 1889. And they called him the father of modern yoga. But looking at his students, especially Joyce and Iyengar, do a little dive deeper into why are you doing those practices. And if you look into Ashtanga, I'm sure if anyone listening to this that's a Ashtanga follower, like really dive deep into how it was created and how this man thought he was the guru of all gurus and some of the things that he did. I won't get into that, but it's not pretty. And there's even things on Iyengar, if I'm correct. In Shivananda, there was actually more things that have come out on Vishnu Divyanda, who was a student from Shivananda that came over to the West. And yeah, there's so much darkness into some of these practices. But the one thing I want you to think of is where were these styles created? Why were they created? And what is the benefit for your body? So the Hatha and the Yin, I think, are beneficial. As long as whoever is instructing you, who's your educator, is letting you know why you're doing it. And if it doesn't work for your body, you are going to let that instructor know and and even ask questions. I love when my students ask questions. I think it's so important. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. A little bit of education, Hatha, Sun and Moon, forceful, a little bit on the Shivananda, classical Hatha, a little bit on Yin, and a little bit on just touching like a little slice into the history of modern yoga. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly, truly love doing these podcasts. And the next one will tap into a few different, more styles of yoga. Yeah, I love doing this. I love educating. Because I wasn't educated when I started this, and it was a lot of eye openers and aha moments on my practice and also as a teacher. Have a great day, great week, great month. Be kind to everyone, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye.